White people voted for this democracy.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't. It was not your country to take in the first place, but we acknowledge the fact that you are here. We acknowledge that you are here. It wasn't your country to take.
Is it your country?
It's all of our countries, but acknowledge it's all of ours. It's all of ours. It's all of ours.
Whoa, African sister is on fire there. The question of control in South Africa remains a big concern. Home to the Bantu tribe, the Zulu, the Khoisan, the Xhosa, and many others. These are the indigenous population that originally inhabited South Africa. Long before the colonizers arrived, in the 17th century, the Dutch, long before the Brits arrived, in the 19th century. And of course, many years later, we then got to hear about apartheid South Africa. This is an emotive issue. Let's listen in and chime away at the end of it.
Let's just admit it. The Rainbow Nation has failed. The whole idea of non-racialism 20 years on, a pipe dream. In fact, we should blame you marketing guys, because you came up with it and then you exploited it for your own commercial gain.
No, I don't think that marketing, came up with it. In fact, it was Archbishop Tutu came up with it.
And you exploited it.
He was like, the Rainbow Nation, of,
yes.
That's,
yeah.
he coined
and then
the
you
phrase.
Exploited it.
I'm not even going to talk about marketing. I can understand what Mandela was trying to do, what, Archbishop Tutu and them were trying to do, but you are not going to get that done in like 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. Because when you used to sing a black person as a garden boy your whole life, and you are not used to seeing a black person as an intelligent person who can think for themselves, who can produce and do things, then you are not likely to accept them as someone who's equal to you.
So Sangam Samang, it's a long-term project, right? So we must just be patient.
No. I think that the concept of being patient assumes that there isn't an urgency to it. So while at the same time, I think we all recognize that non-racialism is a work in progress, we need measures now that address the very real situations in which people are living. We cannot accept, as Archbishop Tutu says, that because of the color of your skin, you will be born, you will live a certain kind of life, and you will die in that same station. My children go to a nursery school, and in that nursery school, there's not a single one of the preschool teachers who is not white. And there's not a single one of the teaching assistants who is white. So the message every single day for those women, there is a ceiling, and until this changes, you will never get this job.
Sinette Bridges, why do we need a Red October movement? I mean, we have 30 million black people in this country who don't have a plate of food. Wouldn't it be better for you to fight that? Would that not make you a little bit more secure, as you heard from Desmond Tutu, that white people in this country are lucky?
I don't agree with what Desmond Tutu said, firstly, at all. And I don't think we can prescribe to tell people what they can and cannot march for. People become involved in projects and march for things that are important to them. There are people marching 6 marches per day in this country, violent ones. And then it is very easy to make an insert, like the one that was played before the show, where the fact that there is white poverty is completely denied, ignored. I, in fact, don't think that most of the people here know that there are white squatter camps.
So why not partner then with the other people who are in squatter camps who are fighting for similar things to those white South Africans who live in squatter camps? Well, why segregate yourselves?
No, part of the Red October was had to do with affirmative action, broad-based black economic empowerment. These are discriminatory laws. There are 1 million people, white people, left in the job market in South Africa. So even if you took every single one of their jobs, if you took every single white job away from them and gave all of those 1 million jobs to a black person, then you will just have 1 million more white people that are poor.
But no one's asking for 1 million jobs to be taken away from white people.
It is happening. It is, in fact, happening.
But no one's asking for it.
It seems to me the height of self-indulgence for white people to go on and on about affirmative action in in the face of so many very real and pressing national problems. And I think part of what's going on with the affirmative action kind of hang-up that white people have is it's the one area since, democracy came where white people were forced to not be allowed to state their case and to win that particular fight. And so part of how racism works is that we view white people's pain as more important than black people's pain, right?
Sinet?
No, that's not true at all. You view us as thinking that our problems are more important, and then we think that you think that your problems are more important. And that's the problem that we have. Ed, can I finish, please? Because you and I should have coffee and then you can sort out your personal issues with me. I'm not denying that there are hectic problems in this country that need to be addressed. But we can also not deny the fact that very many of these problems are service delivery, maintenance problems due to cadre deployment, affirmative action. Because people have been put into positions that they are not qualified to do, and the country is falling apart.
Exactly. When we talk about these things, it always seems to me that the reality of living in South Africa passes some people by, like Sunette. And you can throw out certain statistics, like 18% of white people live in so-called squatter camp, whatever.
Have you ever been to a white squatter camp? Yeah.
If you actually follow statistics that are scientifically taken, then you see, for example, that after 1 year of graduation, a white graduate is about 10 times as likely to have gotten a job than a black graduate. Why is that?
Absolutely. But there is the reality of hundreds, if not thousands, of white farmers being killed on their farms. We can't ignore it.
If you're a black person living in Khayelitsha, your life is far more at risk than any white person living anywhere. Exactly. Me as a middle-class white person driving in a car, the threat to my existence for crime is far, far less than if you are a poor and black person because of the way in which apartheid structured our society.
In terms of the insert that you've given and so on, you talk about racism against black people. You also talk about white farmers being killed. Whilst there's no mention that the second largest population group in this country, not being white, them being colored, is so neglected. We've got the highest incarceration rate. So we are so caught up between a white-black debate and so on. And this ideal, the zebra debate, this ideal where we want to grow to in terms of a rainbow nation is, so to say, denied because we are leaving behind the people who are originally in this country.
Let me ask you this. When the racial categorizations are made in this country under, for example, black economic empowerment, employment equity, colored people fall under black people. Why do you feel the need?
No.
Yes, let me finish my point and then you can respond. Why you feel you must hold on to that identity and why it then leads to the exclusion that you're talking about?
There can be many reasons, but the sole reason is we are a social construct in this country. Secondly, constitutionally, we have the right to associate us with whomever we want to. Yes. We are coloreds. There's nobody representing us here. I'm just asking for fairness. I'm saying if we are really serious about speaking about racism, let us give each other a fair chance. Let us say there must be a black person, there must be a colored person, a white person, an Indian person. But you can't say let's talk seriously about racism, but you exclude us.
All right. Dr. Mulder, if you could stand up for me.
The Rainbow Nation is in trouble, in serious trouble. When we started the constitutional writing process in '95, I was present as a member of parliament. An ad was put out to the public to say, what is South Africa about? It said, at that time, 20 million women, 18 million men, 8 religions, 25 church denominations, 31 cultural groups, 14 languages, 9 race groups, 1 country. And if you look at the audience today, that is the reality of South Africa. The question is, how do we deal with that reality? How do we take South Africa forward and create a society where we can live in peace and harmony and take our country forward? Now, my fight is not so much with our friend from Coca-Cola. My fight is with a friend from South African breweries. The impression is created of this wonderful rainbow nation. We see that every Saturday in sporting advertisements. The true problem is that the recipe for nation building in South Africa is wrong. We cannot stumble from one sporting event to the next and think we're going to build a nation in terms of people feeling that they belong, that they are accommodated. That's why the Minister of Sport reacted so terribly about Bafana Bafana, calling them useless idiots. Why? He hoped that they would win the cup and the ruling party can ride on that sentiment until the election. That's what he hoped.
Do Indian people feel the same way as coloured people, that they are excluded, that they are a separate group and should be dealt with separately?
Well, I don't know. I'm not here as an Indian person. I'm here as a black South African woman. The problem, I think, is that in the first few years of our democracy, the ANC had a discussion which they called the national question about how it deals with the question of race. But as time went by, after the Mandela presidency, the ANC abandoned that because there were other priorities in the country, and rightly so. And what you then had is people retreating into their lagers. So what you have is people like Sunette and my black brother across there who believe that they are different. And there is no intelligent debate in this country other than what we're doing now on how to deal with these issues and how to help people like this to see that their problems are no different from everybody else's problems. And that when you talk about squatter camps in this country, it's more to do with class rather than a few people, that feel that they need to be treated differently and that their problems need to be treated differently.
All right.
South Africa's ruling party has been blamed for the failure of the project, the Rainbow Nation. So obviously the accusation there is that the ruling party is giving lip service to an important topic, an important aspect of the South African nation. This will not go away anytime soon, but let's continue on.
I don't know. It's a huge project, this. Building this country, not fighting with each other and not pointing fingers. Why are we not in this together?
I think the defining chord that runs through South African identity is the sense of exclusion. If you're poor and black, you feel excluded. If you're white and your ancestors were colonialists, you feel excluded. If you're multiracial, if you're colored, and your ancestors were slaves and colonialists, you feel excluded. Everybody in this country feels like they're being pushed out of the box of South Africanness. Our country was built on 350 years of systemic violence. Systemic violence, misogyny, and the exclusion of people. When we start to deal with the emotional, psychological, and spiritual baggage of that, then we'll start to form a country, we'll start to form a nation. But that is real, deep, inner, emotional, loving work. We need to start speaking from a place of love for self, from a place of love for our children, from a place of wanting this society to be what we imagine it to be in our minds, in our dreams. We've got to want something better than what we have now, and want it more than we want to be right.
And when we return, we hear from gardeners who have been victims of racism here in Johannesburg. This is The Big Debate. Welcome back to The Big Debate on Racism. A black South African can expect to receive approximately 13 cents for every rand received by a white South African. That's up 1 cent since 1994. Some of those workers paid the least are domestic workers, cleaners and gardeners. Wits University has outsourced some of these workers to save money. Let's speak to one of them.
Yeah, ke berekela university is outsourced. So I want a treatment that I mean, if you're like a racism, inequality, go university. I mean, if it's about 1,200 rand or 2,000 rand, which means I want to go as a university even ka boyona I engage or I netaba le batho ba bantsho in order to teach civilization if you can come hona.
Okay, so nibhatala kancinci futhi anikwazi ungena kwi-toilet zonke eze-university, anikwazi ungena nase-library?
No, library abadumele batho ba tsena ka library special as ba sebetsa or as outsource. But previously ga ba sa dumele even batho ba ya go toilet ba batla batho ba sebetsa toilet A1. Racism is a inequality.
I'm listening to everything that's been going on, and everyone is talking like us, the coloreds. No one is talking about us. We, the black people, were being oppressed. Oh, there's white poverty. No one is talking about the white poverty. And I think the issue is resourcism over racism. Everyone thinks that there aren't enough resources for me. And what happens, even if you look at other countries, you look at Greece, for example, look at Russia, the moment they experience a recession, what happens is that they start attacking foreigners.
Of course, there's a resource problem. But in essence, the whole question, why can't we just get along, sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya? It is all about power. Who has the power? And power is not only whether you have political power. It's whether you have economic power, yes. Whether you have social power. If you have a white skin in a racist society, you have more social power. And it's a nasty concoction of things that makes it very difficult for people to come together as equals.
Now, so are you admitting then that by virtue of having a white skin, that you have a level of power that I, with my black skin, wouldn't?
I do, socially. For example, if I go into a shop, I know that no matter if I come from the gym, if I go to the gym, but I'm dressed scruffily, nobody's going to assume that I am somehow up to mischief. If I'm a black person and I go to the same thing, people are going to assume it.
I wonder whether we're willing to cede our I-ism, our colorism, our Indianism, our blackism, our whiteism, our Africanism, in the interest of an African identity, which is something that I think is far more compelling than the kind of silos that we are trying to construct. I think that there's no getting away from the fact that the project of apartheid was very linked with white capital expansion. I think it would be more useful to frame our conversation around rather affirmative action, corrective action, because what are we doing? We are correcting what has gone wrong. Reconciliation is not just about, I'm so sorry, I love you, you love me. No.
All right, Sinet. Embracing your African identity. Please speak to that first before you make the other point.
Yes, absolutely. We started this conversation with regards to the Rainbow Nation. There cannot be a rainbow if we do not embrace the fact that we are several different cultures, we speak different languages, we have different traditions, and that was the plan, is for each of those to be preserved so that together it will be a really nice picture. But it all just became one big grey mess, and majority takes everything. And you cannot deny that. You cannot deny the fact that tribalism is alive and well, and I actually think it's a good thing. I mean, Zulu people they own 37% of Natal in the Ingonyama Trust, and nobody knows that the Zulus have an entire homeland in the brand new South Africa. But let them have it if they want, but then give it to us as well.
I want to stay with this point about the rainbow and everybody having their own piece, and maybe you want to speak to that because you want to raise the issue of the Khoi.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying a question. Did the Rainbow Nation fail? It was never successful because it was never reality. You see, since Codesa, this was a black and white talk. You've sidelined us.
So are you saying that there were no coloured people, no Khoi people around the table at Codesa?
We are not included. We are not even like it's here.
They were there.
You have seats. You have seats for whites and blacks.
Sir, could we stick with the topic, please? At Codesa, there were coloured people. There were people of Khoi descent.
No, this is not a Rainbow Nation. We are the Rainbow Nation, the ones who are being pushed aside. The rest is a Zebra Nation.
I want to go into our workplaces because we've talked about the insert specifically looked at your overt racism. But we're working in the same environments, right? We're all in the same offices. How are we interacting?
Pretty negatively, unfortunately. I mean, after 20 years, one would have hoped there would have been more progress in terms of integration. You know, if I look back 20 years when we first started doing this work, there was definitely far more overt racism. I find it's now a far more covert thing. It's as if we can't talk about race, especially as white people. And until we have this discussion, especially in the workplace, until we negotiate and talk to each other, we're never going to build unity. This is our 20th year of democracy, and we're still hearing about me and my white and my, red October movement, and me and my little coloured thing. Why can't we be united?
But
so we need to educate each other.
But isn't what Sinette saying is that we need, she's talking about the rainbow, but she's saying everybody in there needs to have their own space, and she feels that they don't have their own space in this country.
Well, I think that, you know, we have so much space as white people. We have benefited hugely, and we still benefit every day from apartheid. It's nonsense to say we don't.
Part of what happens in these conversations, and I spent many years of my life working on gender issues and working as a gender trainer. And so you'd come and have a discussion about what men and women and how women have less power than men. The men in the room would say, but you're not acknowledging the places where you have improved. And it would make feminists, myself included, feel very defensive. But the reality is that if I am not able to acknowledge that as a black person who has one of the most fantastic educations in the world, has access and political networks, and walks into a room with confidence and will get the CEO position regardless of affirmative action, right? If I don't acknowledge that I have power, right, then we're not having an honest conversation. And then Sinette and my brother over here get upset because the reality is there has been an increase of some black people's power. There has been a new black elite that has formed.
So should we then change the way that we do black economic empowerment, change the way that employment equity is done?
Maybe.
So me and you, who have already benefited, no longer benefit from
What
it.
I'm saying, so I believe in affirmative action, okay? Because I'm also not, I'm not a black person who is so individualistic as to say my power and my access means that no one else must have. What I am saying is that a mature conversation on race also recognizes there are different types of power and that there are shades and nuances in the conversation about power. And when I can accept my own privilege that in a new South Africa, the cachet of being an articulate black person has a certain type of power, if I can accept that and acknowledge that, then I can have a conversation with Sinette because I've given a little bit of what she's talking about. And then I hope she can also hear me, right?
You agree?
I agree very much with what she's saying. I think it's about owning the truth of your own story with all of its complexity. So for me, as an educated middle-class woman, I know that when I walk into spaces, I carry a certain currency that is not carried by my brother who can't pee in a toilet that I peed in when I went to Wits. You know?
Exactly.
But at the same time, I also acknowledge that when I do walk into spaces, for example, going into very poor, disenfranchised communities, I also have to acknowledge that the dysfunction that I see that exists in those communities is part of my historical baggage. I carry it within me. It's in my family, it's in my heart, it's in my choices. And what is worrisome is seeing people who own so much power in terms of land, in terms of resources, in terms of people you employ, in terms of the language that you've taken from these people and used to create a nation. You own so much power, but do you concede that? Do you acknowledge that? Do you own that? If you owned a little bit of that, it would be easy to come to the table with you. It would be easy to acknowledge death is death, pain is pain. I mean, there were 350 years of conscription in this country. It's only one generation of white men who didn't go into the military. How much pain exists in white families? I'd be willing to hear that more than I'm willing to hear that your pain is your pain only, because everybody in this room is carrying pain.
But I don't believe the debate from our side.
An acknowledgement of everybody's journey is definitely very crucial for South Africans in dealing with where they must be at this point in time. To discredit what each and every other group has gone through is to fail to recognize the elephant in the room, that which puts them apart. So you are dealing with indigenous persons. You are also dealing with those who came forth out of the colonizer, that blood, which by far to date is still viewed as the oppressor, the outsider. And that remains a challenge because they have gone up the ladder, they have gotten the advantages, they have gotten the education, the economic empowerment, they own the resources, they own the capital. So by extension, one would argue that for the longest time, that white privilege has owned the nation of South Africa. But South Africans are saying, you have got to realize that it is a new day in South Africa. That continues to be a struggle.
20 years into this democracy, the debate from our side has never been to negate your pain, nor has it ever been about saying that we want back to where we came from. White people voted for this democracy.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't, Sissy. No, they didn't.
Yes.
A handful. Did you vote ANC in 1994?
I'm not talking about the ANC. Please listen. In 1992, white people had a referendum to decide whether they're going to allow the vote. And we gave the vote because we thought that what was happening was
wrong. It wasn't yours to give. Do you acknowledge that? It was not your country to take in the first place, but we acknowledge the fact that you are here. We acknowledge that you are here. It wasn't your country to take.
Is it your country?
It's all of our countries, but acknowledge it's all of ours. It's all of ours. It's all of ours. It's all of my country. That's fine. It's not yours. It's not yours. This is not the place. This is not the place. Sir? It's my country. Yes, sir. This is not the place.
It's everyone's country.
People wearing this beret are saying we don't belong here.
Okay, no one can hear you at this point, so I'd like to actually have a conversation, and I'll ask for tolerance in this room, please. Tolerance. All right, Sinet?
What I'm saying is that I don't think the problem...
So the host is asking for tolerance in the room. And we can borrow from that and actually say that the societies we live in today require tolerance. Otherwise, then, to navigate the environment called South Africa as it is will be very, very difficult. The first acknowledgement is that there's got to be some sort of restitution. The real owners, the initial owners of South Africa are saying, you have got to listen to us, you have got to pay something back. We also have got to arrive at the table and partake of this bread that is called South Africa. So I don't know what you think. Please share your feelings, your fears. My brothers and sisters in South Africa, we are just looking from outside inwards. And South Africa has been in our radar for some of us ever since we were kids. Learning about Steve Biko when I was way back in primary school. Learning about Mandela when we were in primary school. And Biko's case particularly is poignant because of the way, he had to go, paying the ultimate price for the nation of South Africa when Mandela was still in jail. A very young doctor who today would have been one of the biggest game changers in South Africa. So that was a huge loss for the nation, that a young, talented individual had to sacrifice his own life for the nation. Our stories in Kenya are very, very similar. Today we have the Gen Zs out in the streets pushing and fighting for a new dispensation because we have been working from a blueprint that was a creation of the colonizer that has been inherited by the rising elite who replaced the colonizer. They are the ones who are now partaking, who are consuming all the resources of the nation and want no questions raised.
And will deal firmly.
No questions asked. They are working with the foreign interests to their own behest and failing to develop the nation. So to that extent, African nations are still very much intertwined. Even the land question in Kenya is huge. Go to Kericho, for example, in the Rift Valley province, where huge swaths of land, thousands of acres, under tea. And the tea goes away to Britain, to the West, you know, Lipton tea, whatever you want to call it. You've got the Unilevers of this world. You've got the etc. So the rural population, the local population is disenfranchised. They have never been able to reclaim their land. Some of them can still point at some of the old trees that formed the backyard or the only center of shade within their homes. Old, frail men and women who are just about to pass on. So these are important conversations in Africa that we cannot ignore. And if you can relate to this, whether you are of African descent in Europe or in the Americas, these are countries that you will travel to. So you need to be aware of these challenges because you'll find yourself smack in the middle of it. South Africa has faced challenges sometimes when persons who are doing business who are from other countries have had to defend themselves, defend their property because of the tensions within the community. Those tensions continue to persist. In Kenya, we experience the same, especially in an area called Laikipia, where there's a huge population of Brits who still own thousands of acres of land in those areas. Important topics, important questions to be raised. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And as you do, like, subscribe, and ring that bell so that we can keep you in the loop. Thank you for watching and always supporting the channel. If you're new, many thanks. We'll see you again in the next story. This is definitely Afrocentric. We keep it Kenyan. We keep it African. I'm out.